Welcome back to another edition of the Course Creation Incubator podcast. I'm your host, Gina Onativia, here to help you take action, to motivate you, to hopefully get you excited to build your online course, program, live cohort, and build up the online-based business of your dreams. Now, today we're talking about something that I think we could all use a little help with, and that's our elevator pitch. And talking about our course or our program in a really clear and cohesive way so we can grab attention from the get-go, regardless of whom we're talking to. This is so relevant right now because as I'm recording this, we are in the midst of the Conversion Copywriting Playbook launch. And we're talking about the playbook, we're talking about our Zoom live session, and ultimately, we need to know how to grab attention in just a few seconds, either via copy or if I'm talking to someone. Geez, I've been talking to affiliates. I've been talking to interested students. Whoever I'm speaking with, I want to be able to grab their attention from the get-go and talk about the course in a really powerful way. And that's why I wanted to bring on my new friend, Sara Thompson, who calls herself the presentation coach. And on her website, she says, I'm passionate about helping you get the best version of you to shine through. No cookie cutter rubrics or teaching you to be some stuffy business bro. I mean, you gotta love her. That's just a little tease of her awesome personality and how smart she is. So I wanted her to come on the show to teach us how to improve our pitches and get rid of any imposter syndrome or any doubts that are holding us back from putting out our best versions of ourselves. So without further ado, let's get to it. Sara, welcome to the podcast. Can't wait to drill down on elevator pitches, how we can be more confident and more.
Yes, absolutely. I'm so super excited to be here. Excited to talk about course creation and all of the cool stuff and how we talk about that with potential clients, potential investors, potential partners, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, love it. First and foremost, let's just dive in, Sara. Why do you think we have such a hard time talking about ourselves or our courses?
This is complicated, and I think I sort of come down to two reasons. The first one is, I think, based on how we're raised and how we're socialized, right? We're told talking about yourself is bragging. And if you're saying, like, oh, I did this thing and it's good, then the impulse, the instinct is, oh, I'm full of myself. I've got a big head. I sound braggy, essentially. And so the extension of that is that if you've got this course that you've made and you're trying to sell it to people, you can't just say, hey, I made this course, it's all right. That doesn't get people to buy.
That's like to buy.
And I think it makes it feel uncomfortable to say, I made this course, it is fantastic, and it's going to help you do this thing. So that's the first barrier that I think a lot of us have and face. The second one, which isn't maybe quite as obvious, is that when you're an expert on something, it's very hard to figure out how to talk about that thing with people who are not familiar with that topic.
Yes.
And so, you're a big old nerd about something and you can just go for hours and like dive in, and maybe you've been educated on it, or maybe you've spent years learning about it, or maybe you've just spent a couple of months, but you've done a real deep dive. It's really tough to then take a step back and figure out, okay, what are the parts that these people who don't know everything would need to know? Sometimes you start talking about it and then you realize that like this person's missing a lot of context. And then you kind of go, well, crap, how much context do I need to give them? Like, are we lost here now in the mire of this knowledge? And so in that respect, and we'll talk about this more, that's one of the ways and one of the reasons that thinking about this kind of stuff in advance can be really, really helpful when you're put on the spot and you meet somebody.
Okay, I love this. And we are going to talk about the context thing. And I struggle with this too, right? Thinking through okay, where are people right now? What are they
Mhm.
thinking of? Like, what have they already been exposed to? And I talk about my course creators were black belts, right? And we're trying to teach somebody with no gi on, right? Never even stepped
Yeah.
on the mat,
Yeah.
how to do the thing that you want to teach them. Uh, so I'm going to jump around a little bit. So you talked earlier about, we've been taught not to brag, right? So, um, how do we boost our confidence then?
Mhm.
Especially, I find this with women, right? And just, hey, we're not supposed to put ourselves out there in a bigger way. I feel like men are better about it.
Mhm.
How do we boost our confidence so we feel like we can put ourselves out there in a bigger way?
Yes, and that's sort of related. Um, I feel like we've got two topics that we want to talk about today. One about like sort of being the best version of ourselves, and the other about
Yeah.
speaking with confidence. And I think these two things are related.
Yeah.
On the one hand, there are lots of outside forces that we are subject to that keep us from being how, a certain way, a certain thing.
Hmm.
This can be society, this can be the expectations of our families, it can be our socioeconomic, our mental, our physical health. All of these things have an impact on us and who and how we show up in the world. So that's one thing to keep in mind, is that there are outside factors, that there's only so much we can do about them. Internally, one of the biggest things that I talk to my clients about with confidence is their imposter syndrome voice.
Hmm.
I'm sure lots of folks know about
Oh,
imposter
yeah.
syndrome already,
Yeah.
but if they don't, it's just this idea. It's that voice in your head that says things like, "Oh, I'm not supposed to be here. They gave me this job, but they don't know that I'm actually an idiot." Um, or why would anybody listen to what I have to say? I'm not a
Right.
real expert like so and so.
Right.
Or one of the big ones, you've given a presentation, you've done a speech, and then you're like, oh, I didn't know how to answer that question. And now I bet everybody noticed and they're all talking about it. And we keep ourselves up late at night, just ruminating about these sort of imaginary issues
Yep.
that we're just sure everybody else noticed and everybody is thinking about it.
And no one
The
has,
bottom
right?
line is, yeah, the bottom line is the likelihood that anybody's thinking about it is slim to none.
Zero.
One of the most comforting thoughts, this might sound a little bit cynical, but one of the most comforting thoughts for me is that nobody's paying as much attention to me as I am to
No
myself.
one. Right.
Nobody. That
Yeah.
is an incredibly freeing fact.
Yeah.
So, so that's one thing to remember. Nobody else
Right.
is paying as much attention. And so when we're hearing this imposter syndrome voice, you need to be aware, you need to know and acknowledge that voice is not coming from a place of reality.
Right.
That voice is, I don't know where that voice is coming from. I think somewhere along the line, that voice is probably a defense mechanism, but it's keeping us in a state of stress. It's pumping us full of adrenaline. It's raising our cortisol levels. And it's this vicious cycle, right? Because if I finish a presentation and then all I do is I focus and I ruminate on every little thing that didn't go the way that I want it to, then I'm essentially training my brain that doing presentations is dangerous.
Mm. Okay.
Brains are amazing. I love brains. I can get nerdy about brains, but they are also very stupid and
Yeah.
suggestible. And
Right.
your brain can't differentiate between a mortal threat, like a grizzly bear, or a social threat, like a
Hmm.
fear of being judged
Yep.
by people. And so it reacts the same way. That's why when we have to get up and talk about ourselves and it makes us feel uncomfortable, our heart starts to pound, we get short of breath, we start to get like the armpit stress sweats, because those are all the things that we would need if we were about to have to fight a
Fight a
grizzly.
grizzly bear.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So your brain's just trying to keep you safe. It just
Safe.
doesn't know it's not being super helpful, because those are not helpful things when we're in social situations.
So, okay, great. So what do I do to like I know I talk to myself, right? So like I pull out some of my Tony Robbins old magic. And
Yeah.
I remember Tony would say, like, what's the worst that could happen? Like, what would happen if that, right? And like keep digging into it. And
Mhm.
then what? And then what? So, but I know you got some tools. Like, what do you teach to get us out of
I,
that fear?
I do have some tools. Number one, I love telling clients to name their imposter syndrome voice.
Oh, I love that.
Give it a
Okay.
name.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it's a name of somebody that like whose opinion you just don't care about, or you just
Yeah.
know this person is mean. It could be like your mean auntie who's like, oh,
Right.
for that
Your
dress.
mother-in-law,
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
100%. It could also be a character from a TV show or movie,
Yeah.
but give it a name because when
Yeah.
if it has a name, it's easier to be like, oh, that's Janine. Janine's here.
Right.
And once the first step is just giving it a name and getting used to noticing it. But once you get used to noticing it, then you can start to say, oh, that's my imposter syndrome voice. That voice
Hmm.
is not based in reality. Another strategy that I feel like is really helpful for people is that when we think about the fact that we've all taken in these messages about who we are, who we should be, who's the kind of person, what does a leader look and sound like, who have they historically been, but that stuff is changing. Leadership and knowledge are changing. People who are in positions of authority are changing what they look and sound like. And so I think a lot of folks find it really helpful if they can understand that my voice, who I am, is now more likely to fit into that broadening spectrum. And then I imagine a lot of course creators, a lot of your clients are service-minded folks.
Oh yeah.
They want to help other people. And so another way
Yeah.
to think about it is by you taking this risk, stepping outside your comfort zone, doing this thing that's scary, you're actually helping others behind you step up and feel like they can enter the space because they've seen you do it.
I love that.
Yeah, and it's something that we discount in ourselves. We're like, oh, that's something other people do. Well, no, you can do that too.
Yeah. Yeah. I love which I want to go back to that the way that these experts are looking are changing. And I think back in the old days, like 10 years ago, I used to get this too. Where's your instructional design degree? People would say
Right,
to me, right?
right.
It's like I built programs for freaking Tony Robbins,
Yeah,
right? And a bunch of different experts, and they would be like, okay, well, which university did you go to for instructional design? And I'm like, no, 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 no.
yeah.
No, that is such an old school way of
Exactly.
thinking, right?
Exactly.
And I'm not discounting like you are very educated. For
Yeah,
example, you have some fancy degrees.
I do.
However, just because you don't have a fancy degree doesn't mean you're not an expert.
100%. And I regularly get clients who come to me and they are incredibly successful. I mean,
Yeah.
I've had vice presidents of American whatever for international companies come to me and they're far more badass than I am or
Yeah.
ever could be, but they are self-conscious because they don't have a college degree. And
Right.
I'm like, girl,
They're
who's
like,
looking?
who cares? You've built a billion-dollar business, right? I
Right.
know.
Like, it
So
doesn't matter.
funny. Yeah.
Yeah, and I do think that some of that is starting to change again as we realize that like college degrees are not necessarily the promise of financial stability that
Right. They
we
used
were
to
told
be,
they
or
were.
if they ever were. Right.
Right, if they ever were. Um, we're also recognizing that like there are different kinds of knowledge. Things like skills-based resumes
Mm-hmm.
are more common, where you're
Yes.
describing the skills that you have rather than the job positions that you've had.
Yes.
Again, things are changing and that's super exciting.
Yeah. That's good for us, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
As experts. Uh okay, I would be remiss not to get to kind of the meat of this episode about crafting a great elevator pitch. I mean, we've talked about getting through the fear, how we can feel a little bit more confident. Now, I mean, I struggle with a great elevator pitch for my courses too, or my services. So
Same.
what's the secret?
The secret is that you've got to prep. Like you have
Yeah,
to
oh
think
yeah,
about this.
totally. Right.
Yeah. I think a lot of us just like we hear somebody else give a great elevator pitch and we're like, oh, they must just be good at it. Because a good elevator pitch does seem like it's just off the cuff, like it's
Easy,
just
right? Like
natural, it's
it's
easy.
the
Yeah.
easy, right?
Yeah.
Just flows.
So, but that is not true. Like there are maybe a couple of people in this world who can just off the cuff come up with something that sounds fantastic without having prepped in advance. Those people are few and far between.
Yes.
When you hear and see a good speaker or presenter, that person has practiced.
Yes.
Either they've practiced the exact speech that they're giving now, they've hired somebody like me to help them prep it, or they have it's the same spiel that they've given over and over again.
Yeah.
So they've been doing this for years. They've pitched this product for years. So they don't even have to think twice about it when it comes to the moment where they need to sell. First step with an elevator pitch is that you're going to think through some different scenarios where you might need to tell somebody about your
Mm.
course.
Okay.
Because that's one of the big things, right? An elevator pitch is
Yeah.
going to be flexible. It is not going to be one thing and that's the thing and it never changes.
Right.
That's the worst possible idea to come up with an elevator pitch because then you're in a scenario where like it's not for this one scenario that you thought about and then you just kind of go haywire a little bit. So you're going to think through a lot of different scenarios. So for you, are you talking to potential students, potential
Mm-hmm.
clients who are going to buy your
Yep.
course? Are you talking to maybe a content creator that you're
Mm-hmm.
gonna or another kind of creator that you're gonna maybe partner or collab with? Are you looking for an investor?
Yeah.
Are you looking for somebody to bring on board to your team? These are all different audiences. And
Yep.
thinking about the people that we're speaking to as an audience
Mm-hmm.
is really revolutionary because if we think about the audience, all we need to think about with what we're going to say is what does this person care about?
Yep.
And once you go with what this person cares about, and you're guessing, right? Like maybe they're magical and they have some other interest that you could
Yeah.
never think of, but by and large, we can kind of take a guess. And then based on that, what do they need to know? And what do
Mm-hmm.
they want to know from this interaction? We love to talk about ourselves.
Yep.
Again, we're real focused on ourselves,
Yeah.
but the people that we're talking to, they don't really care, they don't really care about us. They want to know how what we do can help them.
Help them.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. And so that's something to keep in mind. We have a tendency to be like, "Oh, I came up with this course because I went through this life experience and then I did that and then I did but okay, that's not the elevator pitch is not the place for that.
Yeah.
Because an elevator pitch is quick, 20, 30 seconds tops. And you're explaining to the person, you're essentially trying to pique somebody's interest. This is who I am, this is what I do, or this is the product that I have, and this is why it's good. This is why you should buy it. This is why you should partner with me. This is why it would be helpful for your team to know this information. And so, in order to do that, I talked about the difficulty that experts have of like figuring out where other people are. This is when you're going to do that work.
Yeah.
Think through a high level explanation of
Mm-hmm.
what you do. And when you think you've gone high level, try and take it even higher, right? This is where something like Chat GPT, if you say, if you want
Yeah.
to put in your, this is what I do, blah, 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 into Chat GPT and then say, can you explain this to a fourth grader?
Mm.
Then that's going to be a helpful place.
Okay.
It's another thing to be really aware of is your word choice. Because a lot of things like people like life coaches or energy practitioners, people who do all sorts of stuff that's maybe not the mainstream, that's maybe more sort of qualitative rather than quantitative, you need to ask yourself, what does this word mean? What does the word purpose mean? What's a
Mm.
tangible way that I can position this for a potential client. Okay, you want to know your purpose for life. Well, what is that? Maybe it's you want to know your reason why you get out of bed in the morning,
Mm.
right? That's a tangible.
That's great. I love that.
Yeah,
Okay. Because I
one,
struggle with this with course promises,
mm-hmm,
right? And we're looking for something tangible because, you can say elevator pitch, you can say course promise, like kind of similar, but it's like I work with women like energy healing, right? I work with women to heal their inner energy. Like, okay, what is that?
right. What does that mean?
What does that mean? Right.
Yeah,
Like I'll just walk away like, okay,
yeah,
vague city, right?
yeah, yeah. And this is the thing about that. I think like using that kind of language does get you a particular kind of client, right? The people
Yes.
who are already into energy healing and are like, yes,
Totally. Yeah,
I
got
need,
it.
they don't need to know what that word means. But if you want to expand your base to people who maybe aren't familiar with this world or need a bit more of an explanation about what that means, that's when we want to think about the word choice.
Okay.
And if you feel like it's getting too confusing or not super obvious, then you need to change those words.
Yeah.
And that's
Agree.
the kind of the third big tip is that you have to practice out loud.
Yeah. Great.
This is not a thing where you write out your elevator pitch and then you're like, "Yep, good to go. I'm going to this event and I'm going to sell people with this new elevator pitch." Because we write differently than we speak.
Yes.
So you'll write something down and then when you go to say it out loud, you're like, "Well, that is a word that I would literally never use." And then we trip over it or it messes up our flow or it comes out weird in some way.
Doesn't sound natural, right? Like I would
Exactly.
never say that. Like a
Exactly.
$10 word.
Right. And here's the thing, because it's not Shakespeare, you can change those words.
Yeah.
You don't have to say the words that you wrote down. And practicing it out loud is going to help you be aware in advance of what some of those pitfalls might be. But the other thing it's going to do is get your muscle memory. If we practice something in our head, that's great. Okay, sure. But then when we're speaking out loud, then we're asking our brain to do a lot more work. It's got to make sound with our voice and our face. It's got to take in breath to support that air. It's got to move our body.
Hmm.
I mean, the things that we're asking our brain to do when we are speaking out loud are so, and we don't think about it this way, but they're so vastly different than if we're
Yes.
just sitting and thinking in our heads.
Love it.
So practice it out loud. You can do that by yourself in a mirror, record yourself. If you record yourself, be nice to yourself when you watch
Yeah.
it back.
Because
No,
I'm
I think that's
wondering if I could put you on the spot and if you could share your own elevator pitch or one of your clients. Like I'd love to
sure.
hear like a great example.
Yeah. I mean, my main one that I give for people is super short. So if
Yep.
somebody says, "What do you do?" or
Yep.
stand up and introduce yourself, I say, "My name is Dr. Sara Thompson. I'm that presentation coach, and I help people become more confident, authentic, and prepared public speakers." So I'm doing a couple of things in there. One, I'm telling people who I am.
Yep.
Two, I'm throwing in the doctor. So that's
Yeah. Oh,
me.
fancy. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, think through like you have things that make you authoritative.
Right.
Use them.
Yeah.
Um, and then I'm making it very clear this is what I work on with people.
Yep.
So that does a couple of things. One, that opens me up to any questions that they might have. But two, it also like that's kind of my starting point that I'm going to share with everybody. But
Yeah.
then like if I'm talking to a company CEO,
Yep.
then I might change it a little bit. So I'll say I help people become more confident, authentic, and prepared public speakers. Not that fast, obviously. But then I'll say something like, I work a lot with organizations to help
Right.
their staff and employees feel more confident when they're going on sales calls or in team meetings or
I
whatever.
love it. I'll go into companies and train up their sales staff. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so again, but on the flip side, if I'm talking to somebody like you, I might say, I work with clients one-on-one to help
Hmm.
them get more confident and feel like they can share their voices with the world in a way that's authentic for them that's not keeping them up at night and making them dread having to get up and speak.
Yeah, so good. Sorry, you just gave us like, right. You were talking about the environments, right? Going back to number one, think about the scenarios. You just
Yep.
adapted for 3 scenarios there, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. I love it. This is a great segue. I mean, we could talk all day, but where can we learn more about you?
So I am that presentation coach on
Yeah.
Instagram.
Okay.
You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Sarah Thompson. I also have a business page there, but I don't do a whole lot with the business page. You're more likely to get more from me on LinkedIn just from
LinkedIn.
following Sarah Thompson
Okay.
profile. And like I said, I work with folks one-on-one who are wanting to either they have something specific that they're working towards, like, oh, I've got a presentation. Oh, I'm going to be on a podcast. Hey, I'm going to this conference and I'm doing a
Sure.
presentation.
Yeah.
Or folks who just in general might want to work on their public speaking. This is something they've always hated. And so now I'm going to actually invest some time and money into becoming more confident and making this less of a stumbling block for me. And then the other thing is I do work with corporations and organizations. I have a background in nonprofits, and I've worked with lots of big companies and corporations, with everybody from their C-suite to their sales team, in order to get everybody on the same page, helping with
Got it.
messaging, helping with sharing that messaging.
Okay. Awesome. Well, really appreciate you coming by and sharing your knowledge. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. This is fun. I love talking about this.
What did you think of Sara? So smart, right? She's so quick. I love how she walks through those elements that make our elevator pitches really juicy from the start. And I think I can improve upon how I talk about my courses and my services. So, looking forward to implementing everything that she's teaching. Make sure you check out her website, thatpresentationcoach.com. I will, of course, include it in the show notes. And make sure to follow Sara. She's got a lot of insights to learn and to implement. And if this podcast has made any kind of impression on you, would love for you to leave me a review. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a single episode. And until next week, go create, be you and be brilliant, and get it done.